people who attend Alverstoke Evangelical Church. And this is a part of a series that we're doing over these weeks on final words. And the words that we had read to us just a little bit earlier come right at the end of a message given by Jesus, which is often called the Sermon on the Mount. But before we have a look at that, I wonder if you know who this person is. And no calling out, by the way, because I'll give you some clues. Well, Tony Stark, or Iron Man's character in the Marvel films. Most of you ought to know that. Should be common knowledge, yeah? Look at that. Most of you doing nothing. Yeah, he based his character on this person. That wasn't a very helpful clue, was it? The second clue is he appeared in The Simpsons. Just now and again, real people end up on The Simpsons. That hasn't given you much more help because there's been quite a few people, unless you happen to recognise what season 26 and episode 12 is all about, which I doubt. And if you do know it, you should get a life. He dropped out of Stanford University after just 2 days in order to start his own company. And if you've been watching some of the news recently, this man dated Amber Heard for a while in 2017. Unfortunately, he has escaped that to some degree. In 2013, have some of you got who this is now? No? Okay. In 2013, he almost sold his car manufacturing business to Google. And very recently, he was invited to speak to MPs in the UK about Twitter. Any idea who this person is yet? Lewis, right at the back. Or is it Neil? Elon Musk, yes. So Robert Downey Jr. based his character, Tony Stark, on Elon Musk. And just in case you thought I might have been lying about the rest of it, there's an actual picture of Elon Musk. Well, not actual picture because it's cartoon. Thought we had an entrance there from a special guest. It was featured in an episode, The Musk Who Fell to Earth. And there he is. Now, just imagine for a moment that you're a child of Elon Musk. He has some weird names for his kids, if you've ever looked them up. But be that as it may. But that would be quite something, wouldn't it? Because this man has an immense fortune. The bid that he has made for Twitter is $34.5 billion, which is a heck of a lot of money. And if it was pounds, even then it would be a heck of a lot of money. Imagine having a dad who could fork out that much money for Twitter. And some of you don't even know what Twitter is, apart from the sound of a bird. But nevertheless, that's what he did. Imagine also, if you were his child, your first car could well be, well, that's Elon Musk, could well be a Tesla. And just imagine, kids, although most of them have gone out, just imagine if you wanted a tenner to go down to McDonald's and get a takeaway, that would be no problem at all. Imagine your first car might well be a Tesla, because that was the company that he nearly sold to Google some years back. And maybe if you were his son, your first flight would not be in an aircraft, but might be up into outer space. And imagine having the potential access to all of his money, his wealth, his influence. What wouldn't you ask for? And with that much resource behind him, one ask surely wouldn't be enough, would it? Because the sky almost would be the limit. And I surmise that Elon Musk's children know the reality of asking and receiving. And here is one of his children, and this just shows that he's a bit weird, because the child is actually called X, A-E, put together like that, blah, 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 Musk. And he has a daughter named Y as well, so he's a bit of a weirdo. But apart from that, he is a very wealthy and influential person. Maybe you'd like to have a father like that, but imagine if you had access to God as his child. Access to the one who's utterly wise, whose resources are not immense, they're limitless, who has unlimited strength and can do all he pleases. The God who is utterly right in all he does and infinitely good. All he thinks and does is wise and for the good of those he loves. Because this is the God that Jesus was talking about in the bit that we had read to us earlier. The God that we're called to by Jesus to speak to and to ask, to come to and ask for the things that he alone can give. In the passage that we read, it says, everyone who asks will receive. That might be who keeps on asking, because that's the tense of the word. But this is what Jesus says in regards to God. Everyone who keeps on seeking will find, and everyone who knocks will be given access. So he's laying it out there to many people who are already following him, but plenty of people who are on the periphery of the crowd who are listening into Jesus are hearing this reality about God, that it's possible to be his child and come to him and tap into the incredible resources that he alone has that can come into a person's life if we humbly ask him and submit ourselves to him and radically alter our own lives. This asking is almost demanding. It's like some of our children have been, if you've got children, you know, who won't give up until they get what they want. But there is that sense to this word here. Now, you might have seen someone begging on the street. You may even have found their presence rather annoying, because maybe they have pushed their hand under your nose, asking you for something. But just think for a minute. If you were on the street, if you had lost your job and your home, if you didn't have a regular income, if you'd lost your family and your career through life's ups and downs, you'd have an urgency, wouldn't you, to ask people to help? And maybe a demandingness in your attitude because you have such a need. Hidden underneath these words that Jesus was speaking is an attitude that is calling us to have towards God of humility. So that we're aware of our faults and our need, and God looks for us to come humbly to him. He wants us to have a sense of dependence, not independence. Now, it's true that we brought nothing into this world and we can take nothing out. And however much we might feel in control of our lives, the reality is we are actually not in control of them. I was talking to someone this morning, or they talked to me about something that's happened to them. One day they're in one situation, the next day everything has changed. We're not in control of our lives. We're dependent upon God as to what may come our way. And Neil said in his story this morning, which he embellished with all sorts of quotes I didn't authorise, but they did cause a good laugh. One of the things that he says, I accepted that I couldn't do life on my own and asked Christ to come into my life via prayer. Specifically, I gave him control over everything I thought of as my own. He came empty-handed. He spoke to God in humility. Perhaps he didn't do that out loud, he did it in his head, but nevertheless, he spoke to God in a sense of dependence. Now, your situation at times may feel trapped, isolated, and sometimes we're right in a corner without any visible way out. But if we feel walled in, these words of Jesus should give us hope. Now, it may be for believers and for sons of God, people who've already put their faith in him. But if you feel walled in, Jesus is saying there's actually no roof to that house. You can look upwards. You can call upon God. There is more to this life than simply a material help. And Stephen spoke about that in his story today. He said, a number of years back, lots of minor things began to bother me, and it led to a period of depression for which the doctor just prescribed pills. And during one particular dark time, I finally prayed for help and got it. And you'll have noticed, now that I've mentioned that several of those who told their stories witnessed to speaking to God and having real, tangible answers to those prayers. Now, unlike beggars who have to urge others to help them, it is possible to have access to God as a child. We can ask him confident that he will respond. That our new way of doing life can have a vertical dimension to it as well as a horizontal one to it, that we can call upon a heavenly Father. Well, let's think about this a little bit today. Who is or who are these words of Jesus particularly for? Well, they're about children relating to their fathers, and it incorporates daughters relating to their fathers as well, sons and daughters. And Jesus' illustrations here gravitate around this. A child asks for bread, and Jesus ponders the question, well, would you as a father give them a stone instead? I know in our house we had an egg that looked like a proper egg, but actually was solid right the way through. And it was always quite fun, to put that in with the other eggs, and see what people did when they were served up. So I don't quite fit with this illustration, but Jesus is being clear, isn't he, that actually if a child wants good things, a father will give them to him or her. They will not give them bad things. Fathers don't give bad gifts to their children, even earthly fathers whom Jesus describes as evil, because we are flawed and we do act in ways that displease God. Even human fathers know how to give good gifts to their parents. But then he takes that and looks at God, and since God is the Father, if earthly parents are like that with their kids, how much more will the Heavenly Father respond to his children and give really good gifts? In telling us, he says we should ask, seek, and knock. And I don't know, as a young child, if you can remember back that far, some of you probably can't, but some of you are still in contact with your inner child, or whatever you want to call it. You've probably gone into the house looking for dad to ask for something, or mum, and there's an age where kids don't stop doing that, isn't it? And when they get older, if they're boys, they continue to ask things, because everybody knows teenagers are blind. Boys, that is. But you've probably gone into the house looking for father to find something, or maybe you've gone into the house and you can't find your dad and you need something, so you go searching for him. It may be you've got an office in the house and your father is behind the door, and so because you're in need, you go knocking on the door. Now, Jesus uses these different illustrations because there are different kinds of asking and receiving, of searching and finding, of knocking and doors opening. But he's explicitly talking about here children coming to their fathers. I remember as a young kid, maybe you had this experience, you sort of lose touch with where exactly your mum or dad are, and instead of grabbing their hand, you grab a complete stranger's hand. Does that ring a bell with some of you? And you look up, and all of a sudden with shock realise this is not your father. One great thing about your father is you can ask them for things, and your mother, and they will give them. But you grab hold of a stranger's hand and say, can I have a set of whispers, please, dad or mum? And he'll say, I'm not your dad, or I'm not your mum. If it's, go and find your own parents, sort yourself out, because there's no relationship there. And what Jesus is talking about here is we need to relate to God if we're going to ask him. But the fact that he urges us to ask, to seek and knock, is a wonderful picture of what might be our experience in life. If God is like that with his children, perhaps he could be like that with me as well. One man says that one of the great tragedies in the church is how little inclination we have to pray. The greatest invitation in the world is extended to us, and incomprehensibly we regularly turn away to other things. It's like receiving an invitation to a sumptuous meal, and yet we go off and buy a car instead. But here we're encouraged to ask God. And whether we find God immediately close at hand, almost touchable with his nearness, or hard to see, and even with barriers in between, he will hear and he will give good things to you because you look to him and not another. It also seems that Jesus is suggesting there may be different ways that we can pray, to ask, to seek, and to knock. And God gives good gifts to his children. He gives what we really need. Now, I don't know if you've been to the doctors recently with an ailment or in a serious condition, but just imagine that you have. And she's asked you how you are and what you've come for. And you say, well, I'm in a dark place. I feel isolated. I seem to be on a downward spiral that I can't control. And I've just been told I've got cancer. And it's terminal. Suppose she begins to write out on the prescription, what you need is a new car. I write you out a prescription for that. You can go down to the local Ford dealer and they'll give you one. You're over 65, so prescriptions are free, and it'll be yours. But I'm not sure, given the seriousness of your condition, that will be enough. Maybe you need a new job. Let me ring up a job agency. I'll sign you up for an appointment. I know somebody there. They can pull some strings for you, because a fresh start might get you out of this mess. I know what a friend of mine, they've just discovered that prescribing a 2-week holiday is what many people need in a situation like you've got. Terminal cancer, short time to live, but a couple of weeks of window where you can spend time with you. We'd all be going to that doctor, wouldn't we, if we were over 65 and it was free and we got prescriptions for that. More stuff, different experiences, changing it for something new. But don't you know that prescription doesn't work? I've tried it. You've tried it. Oh, it's great I've never had a new car. I've had a new motorbike. It's great getting on something that nobody else has ever driven. The smell is beautiful. And, it's yours. But that isn't what God is going to give us. He's not giving us a wide open door to have to become prosperous. That's not what he's in the business of doing. His son lived a life where he had nowhere to lay his head. He had no peace, where he was followed from pillar to post, where he was eventually hung up and crucified and killed. God is not in the business of satisfying our material needs. He doesn't give us a pill for materialism. He actually comes into the world to clean up our lives, to offer us true life that lasts from this point in time when we put our trust in him on into the future. And he promises, if we'll ask him for gifts, that he'll give the Holy Spirit. The gift we need is not the bitter pill of materialism, even though that we've swallowed that or drunk the medicine or whatever it is for many, many years. He comes to give us the gift of new birth through the power of God and through faith in his Son. Jesus came to that which was his own, but his own didn't receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of a human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. And that's what we need. A new start with a new Father. And when we put our trust in him, he gives of his own Spirit so that we begin to live like the Father wants us to and like the Father does. So, as usual, if you come to this church, I've got behind on the... here we are. Skipped through. We've got to... messed it up for the people at the back. But nevertheless, ask for things that are good. What does God want to give us? You and I are flawed people, and we need saving from those flaws. We need to ask for that. We need to be weaned off the stuff that spoils us, has corrupted us, and that causes us to lose our temper, lie, deceive. And we need to be made clean. We need to be washed. And we need to be brought near to God. That guy who said, in churches, prayer is not something we're good at or regular with or urgent about. But for many of us, we've never spoken to God. We're like orphans. It's the last thing in the world we dream in doing. But according to Jesus, it's the first thing in the world we ought to be doing, because he has the ultimate resources for our good, to forgive us, to give us new life. And actually, in order to make this possible, he laid down at great cost his own life to set us free and ultimately from death himself. And he did this through his death and resurrection. We need to look to him. If you were Elon Musk's child, you'd have a stupid name. But if you were Elon Musk's child, what could you ask for? As a church, we've never had a Tesla in the car park, so that would be interesting. But that sort of thing, you could ask him and he could give it to you. But is that really what you need? As you've heard the stories of the various people today, you know that some of the needs that they had couldn't be sorted out by medicines from the doctor. They couldn't be sorted out by the people themselves. They turned to God. And they begin a pathway of doing life, looking up through the roofless house to him. Ask him today. Just as simply, perhaps in a quiet place, ask him to show himself to you and reveal himself to you. Seek him. Knock on his door. Because the prescription Jesus writes is in his own lifeblood. The signature is clearly his, Son of God and Son of Man. And he offers through this guaranteed new life that lasts not only now, but forever, if we'll trust him.